machine learning with DDN. Please welcome.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to present you what we are doing with AI. So we spoke a lot about AI this last day during the conference, and at DDN we have an effort ongoing on this specific topic, so I will try to summarize what we get as a result and to show you what is currently our point of view on this topic. So my name is Jean-Thomas Acquaviva. I'm a senior researcher at DDN. I'm based in Paris. So I started this presentation when I was writing the slide. Okay, I need to introduce the topic of AI. I need to explain to people what is AI and so on. So I look on the web and on various lists and on courses in order to make a nice introduction. So, okay, so there is kind of formal academic description of what is AI. That's nice. And so it's kind of an umbrella word, and underneath you have many different algorithmic problems that can be solved. So you have AI, you have classification, you have deep learning, you have all of this, and each have this kind of particular, I will say, algorithm complexity. Of course, it was before the keynote of this Monday. So maybe I say, okay, I can skip this slide and just please go to Thorsten Höfler. You will have a much more meaningful and clear vision of what is AI when you don't need my little knowledge of this. So, but from a storage vendor perspective, what is interesting for us, this is the diversity of the data that we need to process. So when we apply this learning algorithm on data, so not the data are all equivalent. So we have data which are used typically when we think about deep learning, it's like image processing and video processing, but we have also other stuff. So historically, lots of things has been done on language processing. So either to make some kind of marketing analysis, or also for national security concern, where you need to parse what's going on in the social media. You have also voice recognition. So DDN has a nice story about audio sampling stored on the device. So you have lots of different kind of data. You have time series as well. So it means that, and furthermore, these data, they can differ by nature. They can be discrete, so integer number. They can be also floating point, so it's continuous, it's more complicated. Then you need the FPU. You cannot just use the ALU. But also you can have like a more important difference in nature. It can be either quantitative but qualitative data. This is a cat, this is a dog. So all of this, it's a way for me to say, okay, so we have not a single problem to address, but we have a large class of problems to address. So we are going to focus in this presentation on deep learning. Why? Because this one is, of course, the most requiring in terms both of amount of data to process, and also in terms of performance requirement. So you see different pipeline here, and the deep learning one is the most complicated one to address. So since we have a large variability of data by nature, a large variety of data, I will say by vertical, the kind of data that you want to address, you have a large variability, diversity in terms of algorithm. Again, from a storage perspective, it means that we are going to encounter various workloads. It's not going to be a single I/O pattern that we will need to address and optimize, but we will have to cope with the complexity of this. So let me introduce you to the IO 500. So this is an initiative that I like a lot for various reasons. The first one being that we were ranking first, so we had a cake at the office, that was nice. But also from a scientific standpoint, what is interesting here is that they try to characterize the storage system not using a single number like we are doing currently in the community with the top 500, but with a more complicated picture. So we are taking several axes of performance, and we are looking at every system based on each of these axes. So it's a kind of multi-criteria performance equation. So if we look at this, the first system, the one which was ranking number one, so it's a DDN installation, hopefully. It's installed in Japan. And here what we can say is that, okay, so there is, let's say, two very interesting columns for me. The one is the easy write. So what is the amount of bandwidth that you can get out of your system? So for this Japanese installation, we were able to write at a pace of more than 700 gigabytes per second. But that was a easy pattern. So easy pattern means large, nice I/O, well-formed, file per process, so there is no congestion to deal with. But the ranking also include hard drive. So for hard drive, it means that now we have to deal with congestion. All the processes of the system can share a single file, so we have to deal with lock, we have to deal with consistency. And also, instead of having large I/O, it's a smaller I/O, misaligned, it's more complicated. So here what we have, we were from 742 and we go down to 600. So overall, it means that the efficiency of the system moving from easy to hard was 80%. So we lose 20% of performance. Okay, so we take a hit. But if we look at other systems, the number 2, it's a very large crane installation in Saudi Arabia. In terms of raw bandwidth, you see that they are superior to the IME installation by more than 200 gigabytes per second. However, when it's about dealing with a more complicated workload, they have a kind of large drop of performance. So they went for almost 1 terabyte to 15 gig. So it's an efficiency of less than 2%. So it means that if your workload is well-formed, nice, this is a perfect system for you. But if you have to cope with, I will say, a more complicated workload, maybe this is not the best choice. So again, it's about finding the right match between your specific workload and the systems that you are using. And when I say specific, it means that if you have to deal with a diversity of workload, maybe it's going to be difficult to find the specific workload. Maybe you will have to go for the diversity, so not find the best raw performance, but the more robust one. So I did some experiment in the lab. And the idea was, okay, I'm going to take the IO500 and I'm going to be a bit more systematic. Instead of doing just 2 points of measure, easy, hard, I'm going to try various IO size, various level of congestion, various IO patterns, sequential or random. So random is interesting because it means that you cannot predict the future based on the past because it's random by definition. So overall, I took 12 points of measurement, and these 2 correspond to the IO500 ranking. So small single shared random, in fact it's traded in the benchmark, and the large file per process sequential one. And I try to depict the picture of efficiency of these various file systems. So here I took a Lustre file system based on hard drive, and I run my nice benchmark, and I get this picture. So it means that we are extremely efficient for large file per process sequential workload. Even if the IO size is smaller, as long as we are file per process on sequential, it's almost 100% of efficiency. So it means that Lustre is extremely good to cope with this specific workload. Even if the IO size is even much more smaller, so it's small here, it's 4K, again, very good performance. But you see all this white area, it's referred to the place where Lustre was not able to deliver good performance. And when I say notable, it means that here we are below 1%. So if my I/O workload does not fit in one of these 3 categories where Lustre based on hard drive deliver good performance, I may encounter a difficult situation. So one idea is that, okay, this is due to hard drive, this is good for capacity, but maybe not that good in terms of bandwidth of IOPS, so let's change and use flash instead. So I took a Lustre full flash, I have 50 flash device in my box, and I rerun the exact same benchmark, and I get the light green picture. So here you see that the perimeter, the surface has increased, so it means that this full flash Lustre is more efficient to deal with more complicated, or let's say more variable workload, but still there is some gap. You see here, so more, as long as there is sharing, then I have an issue, so it means that Lustre has to deal with locking and congestion, and it's not very good at this. So now I can introduce my IME system, so this is our DGN Flash native software, and here you see that the surface is much broader, so we are not perfect, so you see if we have small shared random, we are taking a hit as well, so we are something like 20% of the peak bandwidth, but it's 20%, it's not 1% or 0.1%. So here the idea is just to show the importance of having the right file system compared to the workload that you have to deal with. And if you're an open shop, so if you have many workloads to deal with, maybe you have to go for something which is robust. So it's not just about luster. So I did the same exercise using spectrum scaler, and I get this picture. So this is the green area corresponds to the spectrum scaler. Again, full flash, so it's not about hard drive, so it's not peer to Apple, it's Apple to Apple, flash system versus flash system, and you can see the impact of the software layer here. So spectrum scaler is very good for some workload, but you see that there is area where we are still really low in terms of efficiency. Maybe it's enough for your data center, but maybe not. So now let's go to our experiment that we did with the DGX-1 from NVIDIA. So this platform has already been, I think, more than introduced these last 2 days. So we have 8 GPU with a very efficient and high bandwidth connectivity inside the box, the famous NVLink. And we have, which is very interesting for us, we have 4 network connector here. So it means that this box should be able to ingest data at a very high pace. Now, when it arrived in the lab, it was configured with the enterprise class file system, so NFS. And the raw performance from the NFS system was not very good, in the range of hundreds of megabytes, while we have still 4 connectors which are supposed to deliver almost 10 gig each. So we decided to replace this with one of DDN products, so Exascaler, so it's luster, I will say, optimized by DDN. And this platform is supposed to deliver, I put 38, but normally the platform is supposed to deliver something like 40 gigabytes of raw bandwidth out of the file system. So this system that we use for the experiment is full flash, so we have 72 NVMe, each of them being like 1.something terabyte. So yes, there is DDN confidential, but it's not confidential anymore, so hopefully. So we released the data at the last GTC a few days ago. So we took Exascaler and not spectrum scaler for various considerations. So here I've tried to sort what kind of feature we think which are important for AI, and I rank them by order of importance. So our main concern was really about the ability to deliver a good metadata operation. So I'm not going to speak too much about this one because there's lots of spectrum scaler fans in this room. So at the end we get this configuration. So we have our DDN box with, so it's embedded. It means that the file system is running within the box, so there is no additional server. We have one VM attached to each connector, so we have 4 EDR connectors here, and they are connected to the 4 EDR connectors here. So the box itself, taking aside the DGX-1 thing, is able to deliver normally around 1 million of IOPS. So if you think about how many hard drives do you need in order to produce this number of IOPS compared to full flash, you have this graph. So here, this is with 10 drives, we could reproduce the same capacity that what we have for 72 SSD. So it means that in terms of capacity, with less device, I can match my SSD, but if you look at the IOPS, well, this is a logarithmic y-axis, so you see that we're in the range of few thousand, while here we have 1 million. So I put this bar because this is kind of, I will say, classic DDN configuration based on hard drive, so 400 drive in an Exascaler box. We are still lagging far behind in terms of IOPS. So if we want to deliver 1 million IOPS, then we will need to have like something like 4,000 hard drive. So of course here you see the power of using a flash instead of hard drive in terms of IOPS. Of course with this 4,000 hard drive you will have a huge capacity, but maybe we do not need petabyte of capacity for our experiment. So some network considerations. So basically it can be summarized that you should use IB and not Ethernet. So here this is really the piece of work that we had to run this experiment. So the problem is that, I mean, it's not a problem, it's convenient for the user. So everything is containerized within DGX-1. So that's really cool. So you have containers, so you can bring your own environment, everything is nice. That's perfect for the end user. But as a system architect or provider, it's a bit more complicated because it means that we have to put our know on optimization within this container. So here was most difficult part was to integrate Lustre client within the container, Lustre being quite intrusive because you know this is a kernel module, so it's not that easy. But once it was in the container, we have this kind of software point of view. So for the end user, nothing is changing. So there is just LNet embedded into the container, so we can enjoy the nice performance feature of Lustre. So in terms of benchmarking, again, we have tried to be a bit systematic. So we use FIO. FIO is a kind of standard IO benchmark, and we try to measure different categories, so either in terms of IO size, number of files, because the number of files is very important in terms of metadata pressure. So we try to be really like systematic and to have a data set large enough in order to defeat the various caching hierarchies that you have in the DGX1. So if you have a small data set, everything fits into the cache, you have marvelous performance, but sadly it's not going to scale. So the point here is that be careful between learning about and training the system and using it in production. You can have some kind of disappointment here. So we did some extra optimization. So one of them is the fact that we would like to pinpoint the container with the Lustre client close to each IB interconnect in order to avoid to have like data movement within the box. This data movement will hit some kind of the precious GPU bandwidth, so we try really to be close to the network interconnect in order to ingest the data from the exascaler directly to the NVIDIA box. And also we have to support mmap. So mmap is very convenient and widely used in this NVIDIA framework for Caffe, for example. So it's a way for them to deal with the out-of-core nature. So all the files are abstracted as being in core, but when you have a request for a file which is not already loaded in memory, there is some system call due to the page fault, which lead ultimately to the IO request. So it's hidden into the kernel, so it's kind of difficult to deal with, but we did this. So here, this is just I will say, a simple slide to show you the effect of pinpointing. So being this careful optimization, you see that we can get a bit of performance. So when you are using a single container, the difference here is not so large, but when we have more container, we see that the direct IO is really delivering extra IOPS. So here we are around 250 kilo IOPS for 2 containers. And if we increase the number of containers, it's not going to increase the number of IOPS. So there is kind of saturation point here in terms of IOPS, but it's substantially higher than what you get with the unoptimized version. So when we increase the IO size, okay, so we are moving gradually for IOPS bound. So like here it's more 100 kilo IOPS per container. And if we increase the payload, then you see that this is the orange bar which is taking over. It's like the bandwidth requirement. So of course, if we are making a single IO of 10 gig, then it's not a question of IOPS anymore, it's a question of pure bandwidth. So here on this graph, we can see that we are moving from 100 kilo IOPS to slightly more than 10 gigabytes per container. So again, it's per container. So now the question is that, okay, I have 4 IB link. How does it scale? So it scales this way. So in terms of throughput, what we can see is that it's scaling quite linearly. So here we have like 33, but that was for March 29, and since then we went up to 38. So we grabbed 5 extra gigabytes of bandwidth. So now if we look about the latency, so latency is not that important when you are dealing with the training phase, because it's really about ingesting data, but in production, what you want to have is a good time to response. So we want to be able to apply your deep learning algorithm kind of real time. So what is really important is the ability to process data at a very high pace. So you see here we are in a range of 1 microsecond. So depending on the size, of course, the Gaussian is shifting a bit on the right. But overall, it means that we have response time which is below 2 or 3 microseconds. So one example of where do we need to have a very short response time, for example, if you have to do some real-time image processing, we would like to be able to detect the various objects here in a the shortest amount of time possible. So I will say that overall, with this optimization effort out of the DGX1, we were able to squeeze something like 38 gigabytes of bandwidth, which is almost equivalent to what the exascaler can deliver in peak performance, which is 40. And in terms of IOPS, we get 250 kilo IOPS per kilo IOPS. So this is what you can get with the DGX1 plus a single DGN box. But can I get more IOPS? Because so 38 is pretty close to our 40 limit in terms of bandwidth, because we have only 4 IB connectors, but the platform itself, the Lustre full flash, is able to deliver 1 million, and here I only have 250,000 IO per second. But if I add more GPU, then I will be able to saturate the box, not in terms of bandwidth, so I can get to my 40, so it's not very exciting compared to 38, but I can get much more IOPS. So we did some tests with 32 GPU, and with 32 GPU, we are able to extract this million of IOPS out of the box. So maybe this is something that we should try for DGX2. So the idea of having more boxes and more GPU, we can push this very far in terms of scale out, I will say. So we have a nice example, a customer in the US who is doing self-driving car. And these guys, they are using a huge amount of data. So it's even for the HPC level, 170 petabyte is very large. And the aggregated bandwidth also is quite extreme. And so we have a large number of boxes. That's an example for us where I will say HPC scalability is really paying off for machine learning. So it's not just we have one DGX, one exascaler, that's fine, or we can scale like the HPC people like to scale. So I think this is a big advantage of using Lustre. So overall, what we have is that depending on the various stages of the deep learning pipeline, where either you are interested by the ingestion rate, so what is the capacity in terms of bandwidth that you can put into your deep learning algorithm, and also what is the response time. So this one typically is about bandwidth, and this later stage is really about IOPS. Using HPC technology, we can meet these two requirements. So for me, that's important to show that we are still relevant in terms of technology as HPC people. So somehow what we did, I will say, is that we successfully bring closer the data from the processing unit. So we try to abstract the fact that this belong to two different subsystems, and we can make something which is quite compact and convergent. Even physically, if you look physically at what is a test bed, this is a DGX1. Here you have like a slice of IB switch, and then you have a bit of DDN hardware here, so it's kind of a hamburger. And you see it's very compact, so it's 4U, 1U, 4U. In 9U, you have 40 gigabytes of bandwidth, hundreds of kilo IOPS. So at the end, what does it mean? So it means that applying HPC technology, we were able to increase by a factor of 12, let's say that one order of magnitude, the processing time of the enterprise class DGX when it arrived in our lab. So for me, it's a kind of a message of hope. It means that HPC as a community, we are still extremely relevant, and when we apply our technology and our know even to new class of problem, we can significantly increase the performance. So I will say that for us, either in terms of IOPS or even capacity, HPC people, we are in good shape to address this new challenge, which is AI for us. That was my last slide. If you have any question.